I should have stayed in the city. I did a quick sweep of the store. There were shelves upon shelves lined with porcelain teacups, glass jars of various tea leaves, and delicate keepsake trinkets that made me wonder how they'd all survived my grandmother's infamous wrath. She hadn't been the most maternal woman on the face of the planet. As I said, my mother and I hadn't heard from her in over 10 years. Bottom line, the entire place was mine because I was the youngest heir. Nan had apparently wanted to skip everyone else who might have had a claim. And let's face it, my grandmother and mother hated one another more than two old wet hens. I had no doubt that my Nan would have burned this place down to the ground before allowing my mother to step across the threshold. I'm sure there was a lot more grist for the mill, but my mother hadn't been very forthcoming with the rest of the story. But what was I going to do with a tea shop in the middle of the Connecticut coastline? Heidi? I don't know if I can do this. I chose to stay in the middle of the store, not wanting to be anywhere near the numerous shelves attached to the walls. I tended to be a bit accident-prone from time to time. More like a bull in a china shop when I was nervous. It was something I'd come to accept about myself, and I'd rather not be the one who had to clean up all the broken glass. I'd only end up in the hospital getting stitches, giving the old biddies across the street something else to talk about other than the fact that Rosemary's granddaughter had driven into town in a beat-up old Corolla that squealed every time I turned the wheel. In case you haven't guessed it by now, I don't live the most glamorous of lifestyles. All of this did raise the question of how I was supposed to get the thin layer of dust off hundreds of potential disasters masquerading as display items. I could hire someone to do it, but that would require money I didn't have. Larry Butterball claimed this place actually made a tidy profit, but I found that hard to believe. We had an appointment this afternoon to go over the financials. I had a feeling that he'd be asking for a check at the end of it all. Which only went to prove that I had no idea what I was doing with my life. Financials? I've never had to balance my checkbook because I've never had enough money left at the end of the month to put in the bank. Well, that was unless a few pennies counted. Wait, did I not tell you my name? Well, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Raven Marigold, reluctant descendant of Rosemary Marigold. I'm technically the spitting image of her when she'd been younger. Only much nicer to children and old folks. Sometimes. When I remember my manners. There was a time or two I would have made her proud, but those were the very moments that I had disappointed my mother with my short-fused temper. Oh, and my mother has absolutely no idea I'm here in Paramour Bay. She's back in New York City thinking that I went on a run-of-the-mill road trip with Heidi. If she had found out that we were driving to Paramour Bay, I would have had 2 funerals to attend this week. I only have one decent black dress that was appropriate for such occasions, so that wouldn't have worked out so good for either of us. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not as if you have a choice to make this place work. And this is why Heidi would never have children. She didn't understand the definition of comfort. You lost your job. You late on your rent by 2 months, and you barely had enough money to drive that death contraption you call a car from New York City to Paramour Bay. Face it, Raven, this is it. The end of the road. Your new home. It's your silver lining without the parachute. I looked around the small shop I'd inherited not even a week ago, still questioning if I was doing the right thing. I was a city girl through and through. I loved the hustle and bustle of the Big Apple, the nightlife, and the fact that there was a coffee stand on every single corner of my neighborhood. Did I mention that I love coffee? I might actually need this stuff to live. There was nothing better than that first sip of the day when that zap of caffeine traveled at lightning speed to every nook and cranny of my exhausted brain. Honestly, it was pure heaven with all circuits firing. So why did I think taking over my grandmother's tea shop was a better idea than looking for a new job? I knew nothing about tea, leaves, or... what does eaves even mean? I'd made a full circle in the middle of the store, still trying to convince myself that I'd made the right choice to leave my entire life back in the city. Behind Heidi was the large, odd display window with the name Tea, Leaves, and Eaves, hand-painted in gold script letters to match the ornate tassels. It made me question if Rosemary had actually been my biological grandmother, considering both me and my mother survived on coffee. The only time we drank tea was when we were sick.